All right, we be recording for 120 Anatomy, Unit 4. We are going into the inner ear, the Holy of Holies, the center of the universe in hearing, the cochlea. Done the outer ear, done the middle ear, spent 3 weeks over there. We'll be spending at least 4 weeks here in the anatomy of the inner ear and the physiology of the inner ear. 2 weeks on the anatomy, 2 weeks on the physiology. So, without any further ado, why not begin? Here we go. I will share screen, and we'll look at the notes. There you go. Inner ear anatomy. Lassen Woodford, chapter 3, 73 to 80. Martin, chapter 11, although the Martin chapter could be changed by now. Martin's got new editions of his book coming out just about every year, so anyway, you can read about it in Martin just by looking at the table of contents and checking it out. The thing about the inner ear, look at the first section right here. This is what we're going to talk about for the first 15 minutes or so. Okay? Bony and membranous labyrinths, vestibular system and cochlea both share same fluids. Both have hair cells. So let's look at a picture of that stuff. Pull it up here. Okay, make it large. Looky, looky, the oval window where the footplate of the stapes is set. And the round window. Here they're calling it the secondary tympanic membrane. Just call it the round window. And in pink is the vestibular system, the balance organs. In orange is the cochlea. Okay? And this blue thing here is providing endolymph fluid to both of these systems. So we'll just be taking a look at all of this. For now, pretend that all of the white that you see on your screen in front of you, all of that white is solid bone. Okay? So what you're looking at in front of you then is a series of labyrinths, tunnels that are dug into the bone. So the cochlea and balance organs are not so much as a presence, but rather like an absence. They're tunnels dug into bone. And what bone? The petrous portion of the temporal bone, the hard portion of the temporal bone. So, and notice that the balance organs are actually more to the outside, to the ear. So here's the guy's ear. Look at our ear. Okay, it's the guy's right ear. The person's facing you. Notice, so now you can see here where my cursor is. Ear canal, eardrum, middle ear, footplate of the stapes. Here's the cochlea, and notice the balance organs. Notice that the balance organs are actually more lateral or more toward the ear, and the cochlea is more toward the middle of the head. Notice also that the points of the cochlea, the tip, we'll call that the apex, that faces the back of the eyes. That faces forward. So when you're looking at this whole system here in front of you, you're looking at a right cochlea and a right balance system. And over here, hang on here, and here. Okay, so what we'll look at first, I'm bringing you over to this side here. All the white is solid bone, and then the gray is dug in. So notice what you're looking at here. You can see this lighter gray area and then a darker gray area. You can see here where they've cut it away, and you can see this gray area inside. Okay? Membranous labyrinth, bony labyrinth. Bony labyrinth is the outer edge. This outer edge. It's the hole that's dug in the bone. The bony labyrinth is like someone took an auger and just drilled a cave or drilled a labyrinth into the rock. Okay? Dug a tunnel around. That's the bony labyrinth. Labyrinth is just a series of caves. Okay? So that's why they keep calling it labyrinths. It's because it's tunnels dug in bone. And those tunnels are the bony labyrinth. Let's look at it again on our very first slide. You go to the home here, okay? Bony labyrinth is this brown. Bony labyrinth is the yellow. Okay? It's the outermost edges. It's the tunnel that's dug in the bone. And then you'll see this pink here. That's the membranous labyrinth. Membrane, like my cheek. I can push it. You can squeeze the walls. You can think of the membranous labyrinth like a hose snaked into the bony labyrinth. And so the bony labyrinth contains one type of fluid. The membranous labyrinth contains another type of fluid. Same within the cochlear system. The bony labyrinth is the yellow, and then the orange is the membranous labyrinth. So the bony labyrinth, where my cursor is containing one type of fluid. The membranous labyrinth is containing another type of fluid. Again, the balance organs is this top area I am circling. The hearing system is the cochlea. Hearing and balance are together. So now let's look at our notes and see where we are. The vestibular system is called the balance. That's the balance system. The vestibular system and cochlea both are located in the petrous portion of the temporal bone. Both have membranous labyrinths located inside bony labyrinths. Both also share the same fluids, perilymph and endolymph. Bony labyrinths contain perilymph. Membranous labyrinths contain endolymph. Now, you don't need to know which one's which. Perilymph contains mostly sodium and less potassium. Endolymph contains mostly potassium and less sodium. Can you see kind of where we're going here? It's almost like a battery. You think of your car battery, or think of any battery, there's different kinds of metals in it, different kinds of fluids in a car battery, and that's what creates an electrical charge. And that's what your cochlea is for, is to take incoming sound energy and to change that into electrical energy. And it does so because of those different and opposite fluids. And the electrical energy is what's carried up the eighth nerve to the brain. That's the whole purpose of the inner ear. So let's go back to our notes now and take a look at what we've said. Perilymph, endolymph. Peri means around, perimeter, you're walking around the edge of the pool. Okay, peri is always outside, endo is inside. So in the system that we're looking at here, and I'll blow it up bigger, perilymph fills the bony labyrinths. Endolymph fills the membranous labyrinths. Same within the cochlea. Perilymph is in the bony labyrinths. Endolymph is in the membranous labyrinths. And the two share the same fluids. They share. Endolymph is shared. Look at here how this is attached. And look at here how bony labyrinth connects with this bony labyrinth. They are continuous. Very important to see that, okay? So now let's look at where we were in our notes. Both have hair cells. Now, hair cells are located inside the membranous labyrinths of the vestibular system and the membranous labyrinths of the cochlea. The hair cells are always of two types. One is afferent, one's efferent. One's sending info to the brain, the other set of hair cells is taking info from the brain. In the vestibular system, you have type 1 hair cells and type 2 hair cells. Type 1 are afferent, type 2 are efferent. In the cochlea, you have inner hair cells, those are afferent, and you have outer hair cells that are efferent. So let's look at our picture now. In the membranous labyrinths, you will have hair cells, type 1 and type 2 in the vestibular system, inner and outer in the cochlea. Type 1 in the vestibular system or balance system sends info to the brain. Type 2 gets info from the brain. In the cochlea, inner hair cells send info to the brain, outer hair cells take info from the brain. So that is all the general purpose of that first introductory paragraph here. Look at it very carefully because it helps you get your orientation of the whole ding-dong thing. All right? Without any further ado, let's dispatch with information about the vestibular system. That way we can get it out of the way, because you and I are HISs. We don't deal with the vestibular system. Do you know who does? People who go to Missouri State University in Springfield, a few blocks away from Ozarks Technical Community College, okay? They get their AUD degrees, Doctor of Audiology degrees, and they fit hearing aids just like you do, or like you will, but they also test babies, and they also test the vestibular system, so they have a wider scope of practice. You and I, as HISs, we do not touch the vestibular system. We don't have anything to do with it. But you need to know a little bit of what the terms are, because you need to know how to read reports. And reports may slide across your desk about the vestibular system. And we can't be having you going blah, 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 blah. You should have somewhat of an idea. So what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes or so is we're going to just kind of go over the vestibular system, the balance system, and put that in our rear view mirror so that we can carry ahead and deal mostly with the cochlea, okay, which is our baby. This is our baby. So here we go. Share screen, and looky. Vestibular system. Human balance is really complicated. It's comprised of three things. Put a star by this. The vestibular system, which is by the cochlea, which is what we showed. Vision, and something called proprioception. So I'll stop sharing again. 3 parts. Vision, the balance systems of the ear that we're going to look at, okay? The membranous labyrinths and the bony labyrinths of the vestibular system. Vision, and proprioception. Weird word. Proprioception is awareness of where your limbs are in space without you looking. You think, what the hell is he talking about? Well, what happens when a cop thinks you've been drinking and driving? You're going to get a DUI. Cop pulls you over. You've been having anything to drink tonight, sir? No. You step out of the car because I smell your breath. So you step out of the car and the cop says, close your eyes and stretch your arm out. And I'll stand back so you can see me a little bit better. Okay, over like this. So you're standing there and the cop says, close your eyes and put your arm out. Okay, now touch the end of your nose. Now if you're not drunk, you can touch the end of your nose. Okay, you're not looking, your eyes are closed, but you are aware of where your body is in space enough to know, yep, I can touch the end of my nose. If you're drunk and your eyes are closed, you're going to be doing this kind of stuff. You're going to be missing, okay? That's called the Romberg test. R-O-M-B-E-R-G, Romberg. That's a test of proprioception. Knowledge of where your limbs are in space without you looking at them. You know who has very good proprioception, of course, is dancers. Ballet stars, people who are moving about, stuff like that, or football players, or sports people, tennis players. Very good knowledge of where their limbs are in space without looking. Okay? 3 parts to balance. Vision, vestibular system, proprioception. Let's knock out vision, because we're not opticians, and let's knock out proprioception. Whoa, I just flipped you the bird, okay? Let's look at vestibular system, because that's closest to the area that we study. So let's look at it. Proprioception is knowledge of where your limbs are in space without looking. Google up Romberg test for drinking and driving. Close your eyes, stretch out arm, now touch nose, okay? Let's look at the vestibular system itself. This is what we're going to look at now. The vestibule What the heck is that? Well, that's the entryway into the cochlea. Here. The vestibule, where the oval window pushes right here. The entryway into the balance organ area and the cochlea. Entryway, part of the bony labyrinth that contains the utricle and saccule, two of the three organs of balance. The vestibular system consists of the utricle, saccule, and semicircular canals. Utricle, saccule, let's see it. Utricle, saccule, and semicircular canals. The semicircular canals are by far the largest. But notice you've got three of them. And notice too that they are at right angles to each other. Much like in your room, if you look at a corner, and look at this where I'm pointing here, look at the top corner there, right where my finger's pointing. Notice the ceiling, that wall, and this wall, okay? This wall and this wall are meeting at 90 degrees angle, and they're also meeting, whoops, I can't even see, their knowledge of where my limbs are. They're also meeting the ceiling at 90-degree angles. So you can see that the ceiling is one plane, this is another plane, and that's another plane, okay? They're all meeting at 90-degree angles, kind of like, so you know what I'm saying? So that's essentially the semicircular canals. It means that no matter how you turn your head, hair cells in one of these canals is going to be excited. Now the utricle and the saccule, they help you tell linear acceleration. So let's look at linear acceleration. Utricle, leather bag, saccule, little sac, both are membranous labyrinths, so they contain endolymph. They are surrounded by the vestibule, the bony labyrinth that contains perilymph. Look at it here. Make it bigger. Come now, there. The saccule contains endolymph. Utricle contains endolymph. They're surrounded by this vestibule area, and that's the bony labyrinth, and that contains perilymph. Utricle and saccule. Okay, back to here. They detect linear acceleration up and down, like when you're in an elevator and suddenly it goes up and then stops and your whole stomach, whoa, utricle and saccule. Or you're stopped at a stoplight, okay, and then you're accelerating, and you're going straight ahead, or you're going in reverse. It helps you detect linear acceleration, either horizontally or vertically. One of them looks at horizontally, the other one looks at vertically. I don't remember which one, don't really care. All I know is that you need to know that the utricle and saccule are membranous labyrinths inside the vestibular system that help you detect linear acceleration, either on a horizontal plane or a vertical plane. D is for done, okay? Maculae inside the utricle and saccule contain type 1 and type 2 hair cells. Let's see if we can take a look-see. Make this bigger. So, here's the membranous labyrinth of the cochlea. Here's the bony labyrinth of the cochlea. Membranous labyrinth, bony labyrinth. The white is bony labyrinth, the black here is membranous. Okay? And here is the membranous labyrinths, the utricle and the saccule. Utricle, saccule, okay, and semicircular canals. Now the hair cell areas of these, remember we said they're located in the membranous labyrinths? Well, in the cochlea, the membranous labyrinth in black, coiled like a snail. In the saccule, right here, macula, they call this the macula, and the macula utriculi, and the macula of the semicircular canals. They call these bulges here the ampullae. A, B, and C show some ampullae of the semicircular canals. Look at the bottom of the slide. A, B, and C show ampullae of the semicircular canals. Ampullae are the bulb areas, the fat little bulby areas that contain the hair cells. Macula are the areas in the saccule and the utricle that contain hair cells. Okay, so inside of here, macula. Inside of here, macula. What does the macula contain? Hair cells. What does the macula contain? Hair cells. These bulbs, ampullae. What do they contain? Hair cells. And of all these ampullae and the macula here, what type of hair cells do they have? Type 1, type 2. What type of hair cells inside the membranous labyrinth of the cochlea? Inner, outer. Just keep repeating things and eventually it settles in. Okay? So when you're looking inside the maculae of the right ear, you might be inside the utricle, you might be inside the saccule. Doesn't matter. What did we say? They contain maculae. And what are the maculae? The whole areas where the hair cells are. Now look at these fibers. They're all continuing on to the 8th nerve because the 8th cranial nerve sends auditory and vestibular balance information to the brain. So this is for the vestibular branch of the 8th nerve. We'll talk cochlear branch next time, not now. Here's the hair cells. Notice the hair cells, some of them are fat and some are skinny. Some are fat, some are skinny. The fat hair cells are called type 1. They send info to the brain. They are afferent. The skinny ones are efferent. They take info from the brain. Okay? So these are type 1. These are type 2. Type 1, type 1, type 2, type 2, type 1, type 2, type 1, type 1, type 2. Stuff and things, things and stuff. Now look on top of the hair cell. You can tell they're a cell because they have a little nucleus in, see? But when you're looking on top of the cell, you're going to see a bunch of hairs. And those hairs are called stereocilia. Cilia for hairs, stereo for many. Okay, stereocilia. So type 1 hair cells have stereocilia, type 2 hair cells have stereocilia. And in the maculae of the utricle and saccule, the stereocilia are surrounded by jello. Gelatinous, almost not jello that you eat. No, it's not pink or green or red, and it's not sweet, but it's like jelly, okay? And that jelly surrounds the hairs. And on top of the jelly are these little stones, and they're called otoliths. And the reason you've got the otoliths is so that when you change linear acceleration, when you go up and down vertically or left and right linear acceleration, those stones provide a bit of mass, a bit of weight on top of the jelly, so that when you move, there's a bit of a lag or a delay for these things to move. It's kind of okay, I'll show it to you this way. So when you move, you've got all these little rocks on top. That provides a bit of mass. So when you move this way, these take a little bit of a lag to catch up. Okay, if there was no stones on the top, when you moved, the jelly would move right with you, just about. Okay, you've got the extra stones to provide a little bit of extra weight on top so that you why do you want that? You want that so that the hairs bend. Because when the hairs bend, they send an electrical current to your brain. Okay? Look at this picture close up. Here's a close-up of these guys. So you're looking at a close-up. Type 1, type 2, okay? Surrounded by jello. And then otoliths on the top, those stones. Macule. Oh, I hate that gray thing. Go away there. Macula of utricle and saccule. Here you go. Your type 1 and type 2 hair cells, gelatinous mass, otoliths on the top, showing you a cross section over here. And now you're looking over down, now you're looking below. See how they're sitting still? And when you move, the force of gravity, because they've got a weight on the top, there's a bit of a lag or a bend, and that's what sends info to the brain. Inside your semicircular canals are the ampullae. So the ampullae are like these. So you're looking now inside of these bulges. Okay, so there's no hair cells where my cursor is going. That's just endolymph fluid. The hair cells are located here, 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 and here. Okay, the ampullae. Ampulla is singular, ampullae is plural. Ampulla, ampulla, ampulla. So let's look at the ampulla now. Inside there you have a ridge inside of each one of those called cristae, the ridge. And again, you've got type 1, type 2 hair cells. Type 1, type 2, type 1, type 1, type 2. You always have different kinds of hair cells. See the semicircular canal? Ending in that bulbous area. And inside the bulbous area is a little hill called the crista. Crista. And on top of the crista, you have the cupula. That's the gelatinous mass again. All right, and you're looking at type 1 hair cells, type 2 hair cells. Here's your type 1 hair cell, type 2 hair cells, stereocilia surrounded by a gelatinous mass. So once again, when you turn your head, there's a bit of a lag or movement here. All right? So, looking now, before we go any further into the cochlea, let's look at our notes. Macula inside utricle and saccule contain type 1 and type 2 hair cells. 3 semicircular canals form 3 orthogonal planes. Put a star by that. Orthogonal is what I was pointing at when I pointed to the corner of the roof here, of the ceiling. 3 perpendicular angles, like this, and then a floor on the bottom. Okay? In other words, you got this plane, and this plane, meeting at 90-degree angles. And your 3 semicircular canals have a total of 5 enlarged bulbs at the end called ampullae. And they are themselves the bony labyrinths that contain perilymph. Let's look at our picture. Bony labyrinths, semicircular canals, the bony labyrinths that contain perilymph, and then inside the membranous labyrinths containing endolymph. The ampullae, endolymph, contain the hair cells. And what's the purpose of these 3 semicircular canals? Well, they locate where your head is in space, because your head can swivel on any angle. Okay, unlike an elbow, it's not a hinge joint. Your head can go sideways, forward and back, any which way. So your semicircular canals help you detect where your head is in space. And no matter how you turn your head, all right, fluid in one or more of those orthogonal semicircular canals, fluid in one or more of that plane or this plane or that plane, okay, is going to move. And when that fluid moves, it bends the hair cells. Okay, that's why the semicircular canals are arranged in orthogonal or 90-degree angle planes. Okay, ampullae at the ends of the semicircular canals. Inside each ampulla are cristae, ridges that contain type 1 and type 2 hair cells. They detect angular acceleration when you're going around a corner, and head position in space, perception of turning. So, summary, maculae and cristae contain type 1 and type 2 hair cells. These correspond to inner and outer hair cells of the cochlea, i.e. type 1 are afferent, type 2 are efferent. Make sure you know what afferent and efferent mean. Afferent, think at, going to the brain. Efferent, think exit, coming from the brain. The whole system is a two-way street. Damage to the vestibular system results in vertigo, nystagmus, Greek for drowsiness. Nystagmus, nystagmus. I'll stop sharing here. Nystagmus. That's your eyes moving, especially when they're tracking. You ever sat in a car and you're watching a train go by on the train tracks? And you're counting the cars. And you're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? You're tracking slowly and then snapping back to the center. Or this way, tracking slowly and snapping to the center. A ballerina twisting. With the head. Always tracking where you are in space. Okay? Nystagmus is how your eyes track in order to keep your balance. Let's read what it says here in the notes. Recall balance is comprised of 3 parts: vestibular system, vision, and proprioception. If one of these 3 legs of the stool are damaged, the other 2 have to take over. So people with balance problems, damage to the vestibular system of the inner ear, they have big time trouble at night, because at night you can't see as well. And they're relying totally now on vision and proprioception. Their balance organs are gone. You can still handle it, but it's harder. Okay, your other 2 systems have to play catch up. People with vestibular systems often have difficulty at nighttime, because at nighttime you have a harder time seeing. What are things that go wrong with the balance system? Benign paroxysmal vertigo. Put a star by this one. BPV. Benign means it's not cancerous, not going to kill you, but it's a nuisance. Paroxysmal vertigo. Sudden vertigo when your head is turned in a certain specific position. It might be from bending over, tying your shoe, and all of a sudden, whoa, that one position, whoa, did that ever make me dizzy? Whoa, I got to sit down for a second here. Oh. You got a vestibular disorder. As soon as you turn your head in a certain direction, guess what? Your ear stones, those otoliths, have fallen off of the jelly. Okay, so now your hair cells are not going to be normally activated. You're going to get dizzy for no reason because of an incorrect message that's sent to the brain. You no longer have those little ear stones laying on top of the gelatinous mass, so that when you move, you got that correct kind of bending of the hair cells. The ear stones have fallen off, and they are rolling around in your semicircular canals. And ear, nose, and throat doctors do vestibular, you fix it with head positions. Audiologists are trained to do this too. Dixon-Hallpike maneuvers, all these strange maneuvers of turn your head this way, now bend back, now turn your head this way, now sit up. They'll have all these ways of making those ear stones go back onto the jelly again. That's why older people often don't like carnival rides, the ones that make you really dizzy. The ear stones have fallen off more, and they get dizzier easier. Little kids, oh, Daddy, can I go on again? Let me go on again. And the dad's going, oh, my God. Okay? Because more of the ear stones have fallen off. But benign paroxysmal vertigo is when you are in a certain position and all of a sudden, whoa, that really makes you dizzy. So people go to clinics to see audiologists or physiotherapists, some are trained in doing this, or ear, nose, and throat doctors who do positional movements to try and get those ear stones, those otoliths, to go back onto the gelatinous mass where they belong. All right, share screen. Hair cells are no longer giving correct message about head location in space. Results from tiny ear stones that have fallen off the cristae inside the ampullae. Electronystagmography. Put another star by this one. ENG. It's a common test for vertigo problems. Now, the HIS doesn't do vestibular testing. It's within audiologists' scope of practice. Some of them even specialize in vestibular testing. Electronystagmography. What is it? They'll put an electrode beside this eye. They'll put an electrode beside this eye. And then they'll have you sit there and track lights that are moving. And they're watching your eyes go. And they'll make the lights go this way. They'll watch your eyes. Okay, good. You're tracking correctly. Slow phase, snapping back. Slow phase, snapping back. Then they'll try and induce dizziness. They'll put warm air in your ear canal or warm water. That's about 7 degrees above blood temperature. And it's going to stimulate this particular semicircular canal. I'll show you. It's going to stimulate, in particular, this semicircular canal because it's closest to the ear canal. Okay? So warm water irrigating inside of your, hitting your drum, bouncing back out, is going to actually stimulate, make this area a little bit warmer. The fluid's going to start moving around. And guess what happens? You are going to induce nystagmus. You're making the person dizzy on purpose. And if his vestibular system is working properly, water at 7 degrees above blood temperature is going to make you get nystagmus in one direction. Good, normal finding. Now they'll put cold water in your ear canal, 7 degrees below blood temperature. And guess what? You'll get opposite nystagmus, this way. They're making you dizzy, and your eyes are trying like mad to find center. They're inducing dizziness to find out if your vestibular system is working. They're inducing nystagmus. Nystagmus, remember, is when your eyes are tracking something this way and then snapping to the center. Tracking another thing this way, snapping to the center. Hey, if you've been drinking too much and you're laying on the bed because you got the bed spins, if your roommate comes by and opens up your eyelids, guess what? They're going to see nystagmus. Your eyes are going to be tracking either this way or this way because you're desperately trying to find center. You're trying not to throw up. Okay? Balance testing. So, nystagmus, benign paroxysmal vertigo, electronystagmography. Electro, because you're using electrodes. Nystagmus, nystagmography. Graphic, you're graphing nystagmus. All right, enough on that. Share screen. Let's talk the cochlea. Moving on to the cochlea. Greek for snail shell, a winding organ with 2.5 turns. Not 3.5, not 1.5, 2.5 coils. A chinchilla cochlea is often shown because in these animals, the cochlea sticks out into middle ear space, kind of like you'll have like a snail shell sticking up. So if it sticks into the middle ear space, well, shucks, they can just lop it off, and they can examine the inside of it. Not the human. That cochlea is embedded in bone. So it's like me having my fist inside of a solid lump of pizza pie dough. Okay? So in order to get at the human cochlea, you'd have to denude all the bone. You'd have to take all the bone away from the cochlea without puncturing the walls of the cochlea. Okay, let's look at a picture of it because it's quite complicated. It's a trip. The cochlea is completely buried inside the petrous bone. All the white is solid bone. Always remember that. We'll get out of here now. Oh yeah, here. And I'll blow this picture up. All the white is solid bone. Then you see the bony labyrinth right where my cursor is. And inside the bony labyrinth, perilymph. Then inside the bony labyrinth and surrounded by the perilymph, you're going to find membranous labyrinths, utricle, saccule, ampullae, ampulla, and then the cochlea. And here's the bony labyrinth of the cochlea, membranous labyrinth of the cochlea, where all the hair cells are. So, remember, all the white is solid bone. Now let's look at the membranous labyrinth. Let's concentrate on it, and that's the black area, okay? Here it's shown as this, shown like this. And now the next slide, we're highlighting it. So now here's the bony labyrinth in white, bony labyrinth, and this is the membranous labyrinth. Utricle, saccule, macula, ampullae, ampullae, in plural ampullae, singular ampulla, anyway. And then in the cochlea, they call this the scala media. We'll talk more about that later, but here's where all the hair cells are inside the cochlea. And what type of hair cells? Inner and outer hair cells. And inner hair cells send info to the brain, outer hair cells take info from the brain. Review in the vestibular system, type 1 hair cells send info to the brain, type 2 hair cells take info from the brain. And you'll see a vestibular portion of the 8th nerve, an auditory portion of the 8th nerve. So think about the membranous labyrinth as a hose snaked through the cave. First you've dug a tunnel, where my cursor is. You can see the labyrinth, the bony labyrinths. Follow my cursor here. All bony labyrinth, bony labyrinth, bony labyrinth. And you dug it out on both sides, so now you've got an auger-shaped hole, like a twisting, okay? And then you snaked a hose in that. And the hose that you snaked in that is the membranous labyrinth. And inside the hose is a different kind of fluid from the fluid that surrounds the hose that's inside the bony labyrinth. Okay? Perilymph, endolymph. Now this picture takes you a little bit closer to the truth, because here the membranous labyrinth is drawn like it's round, like a hose. In reality, it's kind of more like a triangle in shape. See the triangular shape of the membranous labyrinth? Now, we're not so concerned about the vestibular system anymore. We can leave that guy alone. Concentrate on the cochlea. Notice how the membranous labyrinth is more shaped triangularly. Now look at it closer yet. Because here's the triangular shape, and now what we're doing is taking a cross section. So now you can see what's inside that triangular shape. What's inside that triangular shape. And you can see that that triangular shape kind of separates this membrane and this membrane. I mean, this not membrane, but this bony labyrinth from this bony labyrinth. Look up here. This bony labyrinth isn't directly communicating with this one. The triangular shape is splitting it in half. Look. Splits it in half. So when you're following this triangular shape, you can see its back end all around here. And look at the arrows. You can see a white arrow here and a black arrow here. It means when the footplate of the stapes pushes in the oval window, it's moving fluid this way, and this way, and this way. So you're actually going this way, up to the top, and then out, and out, and out. to the round window. Weird, huh? So look at this. Excuse me, stapes. Here's your stapes bone. I'm circling the stapes. Okay, oval window. When the oval window pushes in, it's moving fluid. Look at the black arrows. And around, and around. And now you're going to go out and out. And you're hitting the round window. Okay, so that triangular shaped membranous labyrinth actually splits the bony labyrinth of the cochlea into two halves. Bony labyrinth, membranous labyrinth. Bony labyrinth, membranous labyrinth. Weird, huh? So this is showing you just the membranous labyrinths of both the vestibular system and the cochlea. Excuse me. So you can see the vestibular portions of the eighth nerve and the auditory portions of the eighth nerve, all going to the brain. Got a frog in my throat. Okay, now here's a cross-section of a cat's cochlea. Meow. When you're looking at a cat's cochlea, and all you've done was you did this with a knife. You just went, just cut straight through. You're looking at a cross section. So what you see here is bony labyrinth. All this is solid bone around, bone in the inside, bone all around, and you'll see membranous labyrinth. Bony, membranous. Bony, membranous. So you'll see these little weird initials here too. They call this area the scala tympani. They call this the scala media, and they call this the scala vestibuli. Scala vestibuli, bony labyrinth. Scala tympani, bony labyrinth. Scala media, membranous labyrinth. Here it is again. Scala vestibuli, scala media, scala tympani. You'll see an RM here, Reissner's membrane, spiral lamina, spiral ligament, stria vascularis. We'll look at all of these terms. We're going to look at those terms. But take a look here too. What's interesting is, look at how narrow this little area here is. And look at how the scala vestibuli, or the scala media, where the membranous labyrinth, it actually gets wider and wider as you go to the narrow end of the cochlea. The hair cells are all standing right here. And where the hair cells stand is actually narrowest at the wide end of the cochlea and gets wider toward the narrow end of the cochlea. Doo-dee-dee-doo. Note how basilar membrane widens toward the apex. This is the base. This is the apex, okay? And basilar membrane, BM, doesn't mean bowel movement. Basilar membrane is this. Basilar membrane is this. Basilar membrane is this, okay? RM, Reissner's membrane, R-E-I-S-S-N-E-R, Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane. Those are the two walls of the membranous labyrinth. Reissner's, basilar. Reissner's, basilar. Here's an unrolled cochlea. We'll unroll it, okay? Oval window. Remember, all the white is solid bone, petrous portion of the temporal bone. Oval window, round window, promontory, the bump bone that separates the two windows. The oval window pushes in. Here's the scala vestibuli. What's it filled with? Perilymph. And when the oval window pushes in, the fluid goes around. Oh, the helicotrema, la, 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 la. And here's bony labyrinth, scala tympani. So scala vestibuli and scala tympani are connected only at the tippy top of the cochlea. And you could see that here too. This and this are connected only at the very tippy top of the cochlea. That's how come the black arrows can result in the white arrows, okay? When this fluid is pushed around and around, Okay, when it goes around and around and around and then through that hole and then out and out and out. Okay, so that's how movement of the stapes pushing in results in the round window bulging out. If you pushed on the round window, the oval window would push out. Scala media, that's the triangular area. Whoops, 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 whoops. That's the scala media. That's the membranous labyrinth. Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane. Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane. All we're doing here is just making a schematic of an unrolled cochlea. Oh, we won't freak. Here, take a look at this. This is my picture of this. Okay? So this is my picture of the rolled up cochlea. And again, all the gray is solid bone, petrous portion of the temporal bone. And then you'll see bony labyrinth, membranous labyrinth, bony labyrinth, membranous. Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane. Those are the walls of the membranous labyrinth. There's no hair cells here, no hair cells here. It's all inside the membranous labyrinth. Always remember, just like when we're looking at the balance system, way up here. Okay, there's no hair cells in here in these areas. They're just in certain areas. In the cochlea, hair cells are in this orange area. And this, see how they're drawn that kind of triangularly again? All right, membranous labyrinth. One wall here would be Reissner's membrane. The bottom wall, I guess, would be basilar membrane. Just moving you through here. So always remember that when we transition from this simple idea of a hose, it gets better than that. It's more triangular in shape, and that triangularity shape actually serves to separate the bony labyrinth of the cochlea into two sections. Scala vestibuli, scala tympani. Scala just means Latin for stairs, okay, spirally stairs. Scala, scala vestibuli, Italiano, okay? Scala media. Scala media is the membranous labyrinth. Scala vestibuli, bony labyrinth. Scala tympani, bony labyrinth. So scala vestibuli is in cahoots or in contact with the oval window. Scala tympani is in contact or in cahoots with the round window. So if you push on the oval window, this one's going to bulge out because pushing on this fluid is going to end up pushing back over here. So make sure you have these names correct. Okay? Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane, all these are on this slide. The same thing is shown here. Okay? Basilar membrane, Reissner's membrane. Basilar membrane, Reissner's membrane. And look at how the scala media gets widest as you get to the narrow apex. Exactly back-asswards to what you'd think. Now, I'll give you a heads up of where we're going next week, okay? Because inner hair cells are aligned in one row like this. Follow my cursor. All along the scala media, from the wide base to the narrow apex. But always remember, the scala media gets wider and wider in exactly the opposite direction to what you'd think. And then outer hair cells, there's 3 rows here. 1 row, whoa. 1 row, another row, another row. And over here, there's 4 rows. 1 row, another row, another row, another row. And at the top, 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, 5 rows. But always remember, 1 row of inner hair cells all along. Look at how the scala media gets wider and wider as you go toward the narrow apex of the cochlea. Scala vestibuli, scala media, scala tympani. That's what's shown on the right. Stria vascularis, spiral ligament, organ of Corti, spiral ganglia. Okay, so what's wrong with this picture? We'll look at more of those parts in just a sec. What's wrong with this picture here? Well, they're showing you the stirrup, the stapes, oval window, round window, but they're showing you as if the scala media gets narrower as you go toward the narrow apex, which is exactly the opposite of what's shown here. Same with this picture, a cross section. Same here. They're showing you as if the scala media gets smaller as you go toward the apex. And we've learned that that's exactly the opposite of what's true. And there's a really neat reason for that. What does mass resonate with? Low frequencies. What does stiffness resonate with? High frequencies. Well, guess what? This area has less mass and is more stiff. So it's going to resonate with high frequencies. Low frequencies are going to resonate this area because it's got more mass and less stiffness. So low frequency hair cells are located at the apex of the cochlea. High frequencies are located at the base of the cochlea. High frequencies are heard by these hair cells and these hair cells. Low frequencies are heard by these hair cells. The cochlea is tonotopic. T-O-N-O-T-O-P-I-C, tonotopic. Specific frequencies are represented in specific places, like keys on a piano. The low frequency keys, the high frequency keys. All right? So here's a close-up of one coil. We're taking one coil of the cochlea right here. We're taking one of these and we're making it bigger. Here it is. Okay? Scala vestibuli, perilymph, Reissner's membrane, scala media, endolymph. Hair cells are located here. Basilar membrane, Reissner's membrane, and once again, bony labyrinth again, scala tympani, again filled with perilymph. And the hair cells are right here and right here. Make it closer. Hair cells, right here, right here. This whole area that I'm circling is called the organ of Corti. Okay, the organ of Corti contains the hair cells. And it's inside the scala media. And it's surrounded by endolymph. And the basilar membrane is the floor upon which the hair cells all stand. It's the floor. Okay? Nothing's attached to Reissner's membrane. The organ of Corti is lying on top of the basilar membrane. And if you go and look here, the basilar membrane is held tight between two things. The spiral ligament, which looks like this big fan, and the spiral lamina. Now, lamina just means layers. This is all bone, remember. You have one layer of bone here and another layer of bone here. And then the nerve fibers from the hair cells, the 8th nerve fibers, go between those two lamina and out. And so you have the basilar membrane, Reissner's membrane, tectorial membrane is just a blab of jelly, and it lays on top of the hairs. There's the hairs. And these are inner hair cells, outer hair cells. Inner hair cells, afferent, sending info to the brain. Outer hair cells, efferent. Now this must be at the base of the cochlea because there's only 3 rows of outer hair cells. If you were at the apex, there'd be 5 rows of these outer hair cells. You get it? Good. Here's that spiral ligament, that big fan thing, right where my cursor's moving. That's this here is this here. Spiral lamina is this layer of bone and this layer of bone. So spiral and spiral. Spiral ligament, spiral lamina. SL, SL. Okay? They hold the basilar membrane tight between them. Then you've got a bunch of supporting cells. Henson's cells, Claudius's cells. Don't worry about knowing the names of those. I never know. I couldn't care less. Okay? Tectorial membrane is the bleb of jelly that sits on top of the hairs of the hair cells. So if you bring it closer, there it is. Okay, tectorial membrane, inner hair cells, outer hair cells, the stereocilia, and then you got all these spaces in here and supporting cells, but this is basilar membrane, where my cursor is going back and forth. Spiral lamina, shown on your left. Okay, let's look at our notes now, and we can get out of here for tonight. Human cochlea. Don't worry about the size. I'll just tell you. How big is the human cochlea? About the size of the tip of your finger. About the size of your fingernail. About the size of your eardrum. About the size of your middle ear space. Small. Smaller than a sugar cube. Okay? Human cochlea is remarkably inaccessible, buried inside the hardest bone of the body, the petrous portion of the temporal bone, like an auger-twisted hole. Note location excuse me, of the bony and membranous labyrinths. Note the fluids inside each labyrinth. Bony labyrinth has perilymph. Membranous labyrinth has endolymph. Ductus reunion, don't worry about it. Scala vestibuli, scala tympani, scala media. Okay, this is all the stuff that you need to know. This is what we're circling. Helicotrema, la 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 la. Small opening at the apex of the cochlea. It allows a connection between the scala vestibuli to the scala tympani. In my slide here, it would be seen. The helicotrema would probably be a hole way up here, but I'm not showing it there, so don't worry about it. Maybe they show it. Yeah, here, helicotrema. And here, helicotrema. Follow the arrows. This slide does have a good reasoning. I mean, arrow pushing the fluid here, and around here, and then down, out, around, and bulging the round window. Okay? Anyway, look at your notes again. And a close-up of the single turn of the cochlea. Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane, spiral ligament, stria vascularis. We never really talked much about that. Stria vascularis is this, what I'm circling here. That's the blood supply and oxygen supply to the cochlea. Stria, stripe, vascularis, vascular tissue. Okay? Here, stria vascularis, spiral ligament, spiral lamina, Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane, tectorial membrane. So in your notes, all of these things are listed. Modiolus, that's the inner bone or core, that's the inner core or bone. This is modiolus. And notice these little bulbs here. Those are cell bodies of the eighth nerve. Seen here, I'll blow it up bigger. Here, spiral ganglia. Spiral ganglia. Look at the little eyes. They're looking back at you. Okay? All the nerve fibers from the hair cells are going, and these are the cell bodies of the nerve fibers. In other words, the nerve can be thought of as two arms. Okay, one arm going this way, talking to the hair cells, the other arm going to the brain, and the head, that's the cell body between the two arms. Okay, spiral ganglia is gangs, literally gangs, a whole bunch of cell bodies of a whole bunch of nerve fibers. So you've got three spirals in the cochlea: spiral ligament, spiral lamina, and spiral ganglia. All right, shown here now. Why you don't think you have 5 spiral ganglia? This is a cross section. Literally, it's going all the way around. But this is just a cross section, so only 5 may be seen here. Okay, same with my drawing. Here I'm showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these. Really, you see one arm going to the hair cells, the cell bodies, and then the other arm going toward the brain. All right, but really remember, they're all the way around. Like anyway, enough on today. We are done. I will stop sharing. We've gotten as far as we need to today. Next week, we will finish off the anatomy of the cochlea. and then we'll get into more how it works. We talked a little bit about how it works today, the movements of the fluids, but we'll talk much more about that in a couple of weeks from now. So I'll stop recording here and call this session done. Thanks very much, Tricia, for showing up. We've got one attendee here, Tricia Barton, and I'm glad to have been talking to a real live person instead of to a computer screen. Anyway, talk to you later. Live long and prosper. We'll see you when we look at you. Probably in about 2 weeks, because I'm coming to Springfield, Missouri to talk at the Missouri Hearing Society Conference. Here we go. I'll stop recording.